So, could you please tell us your name and the official name of your building or property on the City of Salmon Arm's Heritage Register?
Kevin Laitinen, and it's called Laitinen Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And James Laitinen.
And James Laitinen. And you are brothers?
Yeah.
And who was it that originally owned the farm?
Our grandfather.
Grandfather?
Grandfather homesteaded in 1886.
Mm-hmm. And then that went down to
My dad, Gus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he passed away in 79, and then, well, I still lived there with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it's just been slowly been passing down through the family.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that answers my next two questions. Are you an owner, and how long have you been associated with the property?
1886, I'm 66, so 66 years.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess the next question too doesn't really fit into this sort of like long-standing family-owned farm of what initially drew you to the property. But I guess we could maybe ask, what is it about the property that has kept you there?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah. Well, it's a way of life, a lifestyle, living out in the country, and you know, it's a convenient spot. You're only 5 minutes from downtown, yet it's nice and quiet in Glen Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And well, actually, sort of how it came into our family, if you understand. I guess Glen Eden looks sort of like Finland used to do, and obviously we're Finnish, so that's why my grandfather settled in Glen Eden, because it reminded him of Finland.
And part of it is being, you know, we are a century farm that's designated by the province, so you do have that family history and heritage, which can be a burden, but it's also something to be proud of as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it's the only life I knew. I could never live in town, so it's more of a way of life than anything, I think.
Mm-hmm. So is it you have continually been farming?
Yeah.
Or what type of farming?
Black Angus cattle and growing hay. So basic beef farming.
And originally it was a dairy farm, and we had an orchard on the property. But then I think it was the killer frost was 51 or 52.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the whole 70 acres was pretty well, not the whole 70 acres, but at least half of it was planted in orchard, mostly apples.
Mm-hmm.
And we still got some of the old stamps from the old packing houses of, you know, stamped and 1.5 cents a pound for a box of apples or something.
So it was a dairy farm until when Dad passed in 79, and then he went into...
Yeah, it went into beef cattle.
Yeah, I remember, you know, milking the cows, and then we would bring milk in the old milk cans to the Noka Creamery, where the A&W is now. So I remember that from my youth.
Yeah.
So that's like you had to adapt to changing conditions once the orchard died and everything?
Yeah, because I guess it was such a killer frost. And then, well, my dad died. I was working at the plywood plant at the time, too. And it was just too much hard to keep milking cows and working at the plywood plant. So then I thought, well, beef cattle would be easier to raise or less maintenance and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been raising cattle ever since.
So, how many siblings are you?
We have a sister as well, Karen, who lives in Coquitlam.
Okay.
And she left for, she went to BCIT, it was probably what 74?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's on title for the farm, but...
Yeah, the three of us are on title, so it's not all owned outright by one individual.
Mm-hmm.
It's shared between myself and my brother and my sister.
Yeah, Kevin has the majority, and Karen and I guess you could say, sort of junior partners in the enterprise.
Junior partners.
Just because it's such an old family farm, so it's...
Yeah, those tend to...
And the way it is, I couldn't afford to buy them out anyways if they wanted to be bought out. So, but luckily, like my sister, she likes coming home once in a while. So.
Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't like maybe in like a different situation, it would have been like, well, who's gonna stay and like live there and be on the farm? But it just kind of worked out for your interests. Who wanted to stay and.
Because my mom, when my dad died, my mom didn't really want to move into town or anything. She wanted to stay living on the farm, so we just plugged along.
Yeah, I mean, I think fortunately, farming's probably in your blood.
Yeah.
So, you know, it
Mm-hmm. Do you work mostly by yourself, or do you have...
No, my brother helps out a lot.
Yeah.
And my kids when I need them, and my wife when we need them too. Like when we're doing calves, like vaccinating, tagging calves, it pretty well takes 3 or 4 people to do it. So no, I have a lot of I do the main stuff.
Yeah,
I
Kevin
do all
does
the
it.
haying and
Yeah.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
But he helps out a lot, and my kids when they can.
That's nice. So still a lot of family help.
Yeah.
Have you made any changes to the question is the house or property, and what are they? I understand that the original buildings are no longer there.
Just
Right?
the barns are.
The original
The
barns
barns
are
were
still there?
built about 1900. They're still there.
Okay.
Solid, like made out of cedar pretty well, so they'll stand forever.
Nice. Have there been any changes to the property, like size-wise?
Well, other from going from apple or an orchard to more like beef and dairy cattle, but other than that, not really.
Okay. What words of wisdom would you like to share with people thinking about taking on a property like yours?
Oh, it's getting to be quite a bit of red tape, believe it or not. Like because we're actually on a heritage society, you have to get permission from council to alter anything by law.
Okay.
So it's kind of a pain, and because the barns are so old, we had a hard time getting insurance on them anymore because they're so old, but they're so useful and practical. But none of the insurance providers wanted to provide coverage for them. Finally, we did find one person, but.
I wonder, is that like related to not just being on the heritage register, but like proximity to the city? Like if you're further out, is it
not
easier?
really, because we're fire protected there and everything. It's just the age.
Okay.
Like the oldest house on there is our rental house. It was built about 1900. It's on a separate title but bound to the main farm. But yeah, this year too, we couldn't get insurance on it because it's such an old log house and it's rented out too. So it's I don't know how a Haney house works, but it gets pretty hard to get some coverage for old buildings.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know much about insurance, but that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Especially if they're still stable and usable. I guess that would encourage knocking things down and building new things, but it's not always a favorable option. If you had one word to describe your property, what would it be?
One word. Enjoyable.
Enjoyable. That's a good one.
What about you?
Well, it's not very original, but I mean, it is home. I mean, with all the rewards and frustrations of home. And, it's a certain pride, like I mentioned about it being a century farm. You're part of the community, you're an early part of the community, but it's still home.
But we find it's getting harder though, because we're both getting up there in age, and none of my kids really they like living there, but they don't want to farm. So I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years or so. But I don't know. I hate to be the one that pulls the plug, but I don't know. It's well, I lived all my life, so I don't know how it could change. It would be hard. So. And well, yeah, the kids, they want to keep it just because it's been in the family for so long, but they don't want to farm it. So, but we have options. We can lease the land out and stuff like that. So we do have options.
Good. Well, I wish you luck with that.
Yeah, it's difficult because like I mentioned, it is something you take pride in, but it's also, I find every year, even though I don't do nearly the amount of work that Kevin does, still every year I find it harder to work up the enthusiasm and the motivation to do it. And that just comes with having done it for so long and just naturally aging. Is that, okay, I've put in my time, so now I want to take it a bit easier.
For sure. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't know. Is that Anything?
No, I think, just going back to one of your other questions, if you do want to venture into farming, you need an infinite amount of patience, which I don't always have.
Okay.
But,
And money.
yeah.
Like, I had to work off the farm for 40 years to keep it going. Because just a small family hobby farm like ours, you just can't make a living just farming. You need a second income or rich relatives or something to keep it going, because you just can't do it, especially now with the price of land. So there's family farms are getting few and far between. But it's one good thing about the ALR, they can't really change farmland anymore. It's going to be farmland for forever, I guess. So that's one good thing.
What's the ALR?
Agricultural Land Reserve.
Okay.
It protects farmland in BC. Like, you can't subdivide your farm without the ALR approval.
Okay.
And you can't buy a farm and change it to, like down in Cologne, this has nothing to do with our place, but you can't buy a farm and plant 2 cherry trees and say it's an orchard property and get lower taxes that way.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That's what was happening in Kelowna. People come in, buy 5 or 10 acres and plant 50 trees and say they're a certified orchard, which they're not really. So, but getting back to our place, like we don't have many more, but there's a lot of original Finnish things on there, like old saunas and steam baths.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like
They're not.
They're not there anymore.
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of relics of a steam bath. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Like a kind of ruin type.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Have you guys kept up with that Finnish tradition?
My mom did. So there's in Mom's house, which I guess was probably the third house on the property. It was built in the 50s, but I think probably in the 70s we had a sauna installed in the basement of her house, and she used that quite often.
Yeah.
Not for a few years before she passed away, but she did get a lot of use out of it. So she definitely kept up that tradition. But,
And as far as heritage buildings on it, like I said, our rental house it's usually the oldest house in Glen Eden, and probably one of the oldest ones not in Salmon Arm, but in Glen Eden for sure. Because it was built about 1900, and it's still standing, and we still rent it out. So it's the Finnish people know how to build.
Very good. Shall we conclude?
I think so.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't think so. No.